I've been doing this for probably about 20 years. I started in the collection business. I found out very, very, very quickly that it was easier to, in medical collection, it was a lot easier to get the hospital and the doctors and things to correct the claims than it was to get $16, $20, $50, $100,000 out of an individual. So I've been working with how the system thinks about and works about and thinks about itself. And I've been educating practices, individuals for quite a while. After doing medical collection for a while, I got headhunted for a practice in Mineola, and they were buying themselves out from a larger practice, and that required a lot of accounts receivable management. I got very good at determining what was your money and what was my money. Especially when partnerships pull apart, when partnerships fall apart, what happens? And that's been kind of where, and then I turned around two practices here in Manhattan, turning them solvent. And what I found out in all of this work in dealing with really chaotic business functions is that there's three major things that begin to happen when a practice turns around, when a business turns around, and they have everything to do with the DIY economy. They have everything to do with what we think about as money, what we think about as exchange, what we think about as the relationships that we're in with money, with each other, with the exchange here. What are we exchanging? And there are three aspects to that. The first aspect is democracy. And Gororovitz is one of my heroes. And he said, if democracy is so great for our country, why isn't it good enough for the workplace? We spend 40, sometimes 50. If you're, when I'm beginning to turn around a practice, I have been known to spend almost 100 hours a week trying to, in the beginning, to try to turn a practice around, to try to turn a business around, try to turn something solvent. But it's not a democracy. You go in and it's total top-down, it's total hierarchy, it's totally, one guy making all the decisions. I mean, he might give the decisions to me for a little bit, but he's making the final decisions. So democracy is, I think, one of the major requirements for a DIY economy. The second piece is decentralization. That's kind of, anybody know what the UNDP is? What's the UNDP?
United Nations Development Program.
Right, United Nations Development Program. This came from their progress report when they were decentralizing West Berlin, or East Berlin, excuse me. When they were decentralizing East Berlin, the wall comes down and the UN went in and helped them pull apart the centralization that was there. Decentralization is a mixture of administrative, fiscal, and political functions. But I want to draw your attention to relationships that kind of totally go right by this in the whole program. They talk a lot about how to administratively pull something apart and put it back together. They talk a lot about the fiscal policy, and they talk a lot about how all these things are really political ideas. And I think the DIY economy is a very political idea, and we're not going to really have an operable way of talking and functioning about this as long as it's an idea. These are political. The DIY economy is a very political idea. It involves fiscal responsibility. It involves fiscal ideas. Mary's going to talk about it a little bit later, but it involves understanding what kind of administrative structures that we're going to be in. Because we're organized people. We're smart people. I want to keep track of stuff. I'm a type A kind of wonky guy. I like that. DIY. This comes from Wikipedia.org. I call it doing it ourselves. It's called DIY, but it's really, when you talk about DIY, I'm not talking about me and my bootstraps and look at me. I'm really talking about us. I'm talking about what a we is, who we are, and how we operate, and what the decisions that we want to make, not some top-down organizations. So the third thing is, do-it-yourself is a method of building, right? Modifying and repairing something without the aid of experts or professionals. And so keep this, I'm going to draw your attention to experts and professionals. Keep that kind of idea in your head. If the DIY economy doesn't need experts and professionals, you know, I'm an expert. I'm an expert on a few things. You know, the DIY economy doesn't need me. I think you're probably a professional at something, and you're probably an expert at something as well. So why does the DIY economy not need experts and professionals? Just want to ask you to keep that in mind for just a minute. So related to democracy, I'd like to, has anybody heard of Paul Burstin and his work? He's an activist out of Chelsea, Massachusetts. He teaches at the New School for Democratic Management. He wrote a book called The Workplace Democratization and its internal dynamics. He went to the Northwest and studied plywood companies. Apparently, most of the plywood companies in the U.S., especially in the Northwest, are worker-owned co-ops. And some have been really super magnificently successful. In fact, they're even kind of difficult to get in. You know, you almost have to be grandfathered or get an inheritance to get into these plywood companies because they're so fantastic to work for. Great health benefits, and, you know, wealthy, the workers are making like $60 an hour, you know, that kind of thing. So he went in and he found out why some of them are really successful and why some of them suck and have gone about, and why some of them fail. So if this is, you know, what makes them work and what makes them not, he came up with these 6 components for a democratic workplace. And this is the structure, I think, of what it means to actually physically work in a DIY economy. Are we working? I don't want to give. I want things to be manufactured. I like nice clothes. I like my phone. You know, so democratic workplaces, I think, are essential. And for us to understand what a democratic workplace is, he lays it out. It requires participation. There's an economic return. That's the fiscal part. Remember we talked about that earlier? That's the fiscal part. This is the economic return. Sharing management level information. This is huge. Nobody does this. Almost nobody does this. What your boss knows, you don't know. And it's important that your boss make sure that you don't know some things. You don't even know what, often, we don't even know what the guy next to us is making. And we're not even supposed to ask. Sharing management level information. Guaranteed individual rights will come, and this is another sort of subset here, a judicial process. And in the independent judiciary, and a participatory consciousness. This is key, in my personal opinion. This is huge. Why isn't every single seat in every one of these left forum things filled with every single one of these things, every single one of these programs? There's a lot of brilliant people walking around here. A participatory consciousness. Do we have a participatory consciousness? Do you want to share what you're doing with anybody? Or is it just yours? Do I really want to give it away? Is it really okay to give it away? I mean, how much are we living it? We talk about it, but am I putting my feet there? Next guy, yes.
Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
About the participatory consciousness?
Yeah.
I mean, I was part of a collective in a restaurant for years back.
Beautiful.
But part of that, I was wondering if you also mean liking the process. Like, there's some people that just can't stand meetings, and they'll tell you. I mean, they're in a collective, but they can't stand.
Right.
You have to be able to tolerate a certain amount of loving process.
Or you have to be able to understand that I'm going to trust you. I'm not going to go to the meetings, but that means I have to trust the decision everybody else is going to make. I mean, I like really beneficial meetings, but I don't like crazy, stupid meetings. You know, I love the consensus process, but I don't like being in a consensus project with a facilitator who doesn't know what she's doing. Ever been in a meeting with a consensus facilitator who knows what they're doing?
Yeah.
It's just like that, and it's beautiful, it's art. But we don't teach it. We don't teach it. It's not a regular thing that we're doing. That's a kind of a side thing, and I think that's right. It's all part of the process. But if you're not going to participate, you need to have trust. And you also, well, I mean, that's Robert Owen is, anybody know the significance of Robert Owen? Wonderful. I'm so glad I get to tell you about Robert Owen. 1771 to 1885, you'll notice that the United States Revolution is in there. You'll also know that Marx's Das Kapital was written during that period. He was a cotton mill baron. He established self-governing communities in Orpington, Scotland, and New Harmony, Indiana, and none of them lasted more than 2 years. They were very hierarchical and very religious, as you might imagine at this period of time. He's a Scotsman. His big thing was, like we were getting to, his big thing was education. That's why I moved on to the next slide. His big thing was raising the society that we want to have. Another person that did a lot of that was Krishnamurti. You might want to look in. But after Marx met this guy and hung out with this guy, he wrote Das Kapital and the socialist solution after meeting this man and looking at his work. Rochdale principles. Those communities didn't last very long. They were in New Harmony and in Orpington. They didn't last very long. But it wasn't very long before before the weavers that used to be in his mill discovered the ways in which that they wanted to work together that actually worked, that would create a community, that would create a business that actually had some legs. And this took over. These are the Rochdale principles that most, if not all, co-ops are based on. This is the DIY economy. This is the business that you have with your friends. This is going to work and loving it. It's voluntary open membership, and that can be established in lots of different ways regionally. You know, you need to be a weaver, you need to have this specific skill. There's democratic member control, there's democracy again. Both of those two things. Member economic participation, that's the fiscal thing that we were talking about earlier. Autonomy and independence, democracy. And education, training, and information. They're constantly rolling out to their members, rolling out to the community, whether or not you even become a part of the co-op. They're creating the community that understands what they're doing. That's the DIY economy. Are you sharing what you know? Are you a part of the real live economy that you're even actually in? The coffee shop, the girl who gets your coffee, the paper guy, the newspaper guy. Do you know everybody that you get your stuff from? Do you know everybody in your routine? And it's a cooperation among each other. Deal with the people that support your mindset to creating your world, even if you have to pay more for a little while. And the bottom line, and this is brand new, Zamani in 2007 added this, and it's been widely adopted. This was kind of assumed in that consciousness model we talked about a little bit earlier. This concern with the community was just sort of assumed in all of these other things. And Zamani recently, 2007, added it as a seventh principle. There's been 6 for a long time, and this is 7. Co-ops are a real good way of rolling out a benefit to the community, and nobody is doing. And there's been a lot of talk about here, but nobody is really doing that. There's triple line businesses now, but a lot of businesses are greenwashing or share washing, and the co-ops put it right into their particular part. And one of my favorite ladies, Eleanor Ostrom. Adore this woman. Absolutely adore this woman.
She looks kind of grumpy.
She won the Nobel Prize in 2009 for economics. She's the only woman who's ever won the Nobel Prize for economics. Her school that she goes along with is called Institutional Economics. Institutional Economics is about what is your responsibility if you're a business. What are you in business actually for? The economics of what is business? It's supposed to be, she says, and that's what the institution of economics is, it's supposed to be beneficial to the community. It's supposed to be a service. It's supposed to be rolling out a greater and greater abundance and wealth and comfort for the community and providing a valuable service that the community of itself can't provide. It's a way of organizing and rolling out greater and greater abundance for a community. That's what business is supposed to be. That's the school she was in, institutional economics. And she coined what she did, human ecosystem, or how well we naturally participate in the world. Actually what we naturally want to do. We want to be with our friends, and we want to have parties, we want to give stuff away, we want to be generous, we want to be safe. This is kind of what an economy is. We should call it the human economy. Not a different thing, but the human economy. Anybody know what the phrase tragedy of the commons? That's what she won the Nobel Prize for. Tragedy of the commons, this guy named Tippin, I believe it's Tippin, in the 70s explained it, that if you have a resource, a common resource, that if it's not managed by a private institution or the state, the people will eat it all up. So if you've got a pond, if nobody owns this pond, anybody is able to come and get fish out of this pond, somebody will go and take all the fish out of this pond, full the pond. You know, that'll just happen because we're selfish and greedy, and and Eleanor proved that wasn't correct. She went all over the world and proved that when there's a common resource, the community sets up rules and understandings about how we're going to keep the fish into the pond so we can fish forever. And she created the 8 principles of managing a commons. These are the rules for a greater DIY economy. This stuff is internalized. This stuff becomes internalized. And this is how children make games to play with each other. We all did this naturally when we were saying, okay, I'll be the Indian and you be the cowboy, I'll be the Indian. We set up rules about how it was going to be, and we pretended and we played. What are the boundaries? There are rules for local needs. It's just so self-evident. You should want a Nobel Prize for this. Those affected by the rules make the rules. This is schoolyard stuff. To me, outsiders respect the rules. Monitor member behavior. Graduated sanctions for rule breakers. You do it once, it's a slap. You do it 2, we take away your rod. You do it 3 times, you're never ever come to the point again. Low-cost dispute resolution. It can't be onerous to, like I have a dispute with you. We can't make that so high. And this is the scaling factor. The DIY economy isn't just your backyard. It isn't just your neighborhood. It isn't just your city. It's the world. It can be the world. But think about what a nest is. A lot of us are used to thinking about like nesting dolls, right? The Russian nesting doll, smaller, 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 smaller. But if you think about what a nest is, it's a half circle, right? It's a half circle, a nest. So it more resembles a flower or a bud. And if you're an individual with the nested tiers of governance and a DIY economy, you can access how bits of who has authority and who has knowledge at any level along the nest. You can touch any of the concentric circles. That's what a nested governance means. It's not closed fist. It's not on top, one on top of the other. It's actually a sliced open circle, so you can a governance that you can access all the points to. So if we know all these principles, and they're starting to sound really, really, really familiar by now, even natural, we are required to take a look at what kind of consciousness, what kind of walking around in your body, like she was talking about, in our heads, doing feet on the ground work. Robert Fritz is an expert on the creative process. He's from Newfane, Vermont. He's a composer and a consultant. He wrote the book Path of Least Resistance and Your Life is Art. But his big thing is transcendence. Continually transforming and transcending. We grow up. We have to keep growing up. We have to keep getting more mature. Keep acquiring a new yoga pose. Keep learning about the next better way to do something. It's really important. And that's who we are as human beings, I think. This transcendence. And his process, this is the creative process. You have an idea. And you need to say, I choose to have a DIY economy. I choose to have a bicycle shop or bicycle sharing. I choose to have, you know what your community needs. You know actually what you want to see in your community. You know what's missing from your community. You know what's missing from your backyard. Nobody has to tell you any of this. What do you want? Do you really know what you really want? Or is it just a pretty idea that we like to think about? I think a lot of us are, I know I've been in the past really interested in pretty ideas and have been a little less interested in doing something in my community. But because it's really important to do it and to know exactly what that is. And I mean exactly. The assimilation process. That's the second piece here. Is we do want to know something. There is something that you want to learn how to do. Whether it's to work with other people, create a collective, create a cult. There is that you don't know how to do. That's something that you want to do that you don't know how to do. That you're willing to learn how to do. So let's learn how to do what we want to do it. And it's okay if you don't know. The path is that it becomes internalized and then it becomes externalized. You learn it and it comes out, and you teach it or something, and you create momentum when people get involved. That's why you have to do what you love. You have immense energy for doing what you love. My mother didn't get paid for raising any of her 4 kids. She loves us all. We love our projects. They aren't us. We love our projects. And in this momentum process, you actually learn how you work best. Do you work best at 2 o'clock at night or 2 o'clock in the afternoon? Where are you actually going to do what you're going to do? Comparing yourself to how somebody else does something is ridiculous, and it'll get us nowhere. But if you know how you work best and are honest about what you like and what you want to do, then you'll probably actually do it. We need you to do it. And then there's the completion. The project actually does. And you can move on to the next great, fabulous thing. And I got 4 conclusions to bring this home. The first is building a new world in the shell of the old is a creative process. It just is. I love that house.
Where is it?
It's Scarlet's. Built inside of an old castle. Perfect example of building the new and the shell of the old IWW offer. The second is doing it yourself is by definition a creative process. We're talking about the creative process here. We're talking about, it's like, oh, this whole thing is collapsing. We need to have theories and ideas about the way that it's forward. Yeah, we do. Those things are great, but it is still a creative process, and you are a human being, so you are a creative person. It's, so admitting and being a part of and participating in your own creative function, I think, is important. The third is to get where I started off. We are the experts that we're seeking. Waiting for somebody else to do it is really the old method. Waiting for the hierarchical management of some, a Deus ex machina to come down and tell us how it's going to be, or some funder to come in and make everything okay, is the way that things don't change. And lastly, I love these fireworkers. It's one of my favorite things to do in the new circus stuff that's coming out. is the world needs you to do what you love. And that's going to be, it's going to require each of us to be doing what we love. And there's infinite energy for doing what we love. And I'm Glen Morton Glanaway.
Is it possible to go back to that nice house?
Yeah. Probably.
Who's that poster you did?
Who?
You had it in Krishnamurti, the building, a new world, and showing the old.
It's so old, I couldn't find an exact quote for it. It's part of the kind of the tag or the logo for the IWW.
It's beautiful.
Where did you say that is?
This is Scotland. I didn't do anything more than that. Yeah, this is me. I'm a certified navigator for the state of New York. I lecture mostly on the Affordable Care Act and do education with businesses and individuals on the Affordable Care Act.
And she was asking about the interfaith minister. She was asking about the interfaith
Yeah.
minister. What is that?
I went to seminary. I went to an interfaith seminary, which means I'm ordained in the state of New York to be an officiant for marriage and things like that.
Right.
I also do derive part of my living from doing spiritual counseling, workshops, and things. And we're having I'm actually rolling out a webinar on June 20th. If you're interested, it's called Your Passion, Your Treasure. The world needs you to do what you love. Of course, the world needs you to do what you love, and it's about taking apart the assumed ideas in the way in which the world works, the way in which our minds work, taking apart those unexamined ideas, pulling them apart so we can actually step into our passions and step into what we really want to do. There's something I have found that a lot of us really want to do, but we're using a lot of excuses like the world won't let me do it, or I'm a boy, I'm a girl, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too blonde, I'm too thin and too rich to do this. You know, thank you for laughing. So there's a lot of internal talk we have, a lot of internal mechanisms of society and theory, which we talked a lot about in these last few days, that just aren't examined. We just aren't thinking. We're swimming in all of this, and we just don't know. We're really aren't conscious about how we're buying into a lot of it. And A Course in Miracles, integral theory, the Anapanasati Sutra, which is how to meditate, which is a meditation sutra from the Buddhist Theravadan tradition, are really good examples of how, and they're clear instruction. You know how I like lists. You know how I like methods and points and things like that. They really put them out there as a way of saying these are the steps. This is what you look at. This is how you build a container for your own transformation. That word transformation happened a couple of times in here because each of these people were describing the transformation process. Eleanor describes the transformation process, how you transform a barren plot of land into something useful. How do you turn a workplace into a great place to go to work? How do you turn a business into something that's beneficial for the community? These are transformational processes. You're entitled to a transformational process. Your community is entitled to your transformation. Your community is entitled to a transformational experience. And Your Passion, Your Treasure, and my webinar is a good way to do that. What's up?
Is it a good time for me to ask?
Sure.
Okay. I don't know. So what I'm really appreciating about what you just shared is that I find a lot of your perspective and discourse is lacking in a lot of the other workshops.
Me too.
And I can't wait till, and what does it take to meld the two together more. I think in certain areas it totally is, and I'm very excited about that because as an activist, I feel I like the term spiritual activism, and there's a few people that totally practice that. Do you know about Paul River?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's great.
Occupy Love.
Yeah,
He did all those things. It's great.
And like that whole perspective, or even yoga teachers, like my teacher in Toronto, Michael Stone, who does a lot of lecturing around the world, from Center of Gravity, is just bringing this perspective of taking a study, and then how do we step up to the plate and take action from within so that everyone benefits, we benefit, and we're actually making change from a positive, I don't know about a positive place, but from a place of action as compared to a lot of what I still hear big time, which is anger, fear, blame, which I can understand if someone's really downtrodden and they've just, their whole reality has been suffering. It's how do you raise the bar to own the suffering and realize you can move beyond it and take responsibility?
Kashama yesterday said that we need to never put down somebody because they're disheartened and disgusted with the system.
No.
That's a completely rational reaction to all of this.
Yes.
But she also talked about being a part of a movement. She talked a lot about creating organizations that actually you can hang out with.
What workshop is that?
What
workshop is that?
She did the yesterday's lunch and learn in L63. The luncheon thing.
That was elected in Seattle, is that who you?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. So, what you're talking about here is really perspective.
Yeah.
You're talking, see, libertarians, the classic example of what makes an anarchist and what makes a libertarian is that libertarians are very, very concerned with freedom from a negative freedom. Understand a negative freedom? I don't want something. I'm going to push. Anarchists are about, the classical definition where they split is anarchists want freedom to do something. I'm a much more freedom to kind of person.
Yeah.
I want to build things. I want to meet people. I want to have a good time. I like beer. I like dancing. I like, I like to be myself. I like interesting people. Please curate your life for me. I want to know, if you want to curate your life for me, we're going to be great friends. Because I can't be you. It's really important that you're you. I gotta rely on you to be so coolly you, because you're going to bring me your world. I want you to bring me your world. I want to bring you my world. You don't have to know what I know. I want to know what I know. I need you to know what you know, and share that. That's a freedom too. Instead of, I want to stop you from coming on my land, arresting me, determining what I'm going to own. That's a negative. Those are negative freedoms. It's just a way of talking